is working with us, focused on communications this year. So welcome, Sydney's going to give us an introduction to our keynote today.
Okay. Okay. Does it?
You have to do both.
Oh, okay. I see. I have to do both. Okay, perfect.
Interviewed at the.
Yes, for real. Hi, everybody. As Julie said, I'm Sydney. It's so nice to be here with you all. And thank you for joining us for our keynote session. And we want to recognize, as we're being live streamed right now, thank you to the University Library and Grandmothers for Reproductive Rights, who are in collaboration with this live stream. So I would love to welcome our keynote speaker. Gaylon B. Alcaraz has a long history in the Midwest as an activist, organizer, and champion of human rights. As the past executive director of the Chicago Abortion Fund, she worked within the reproductive justice, rights, health movement to advocate for low-income women seeking to control their reproductive freedom. Among the many social justice accomplishments credited, she served as a founding board member of Affinity Community Services, a social justice organization that advocates for the rights of Black, lesbian, and bisexual women in the Chicagoland area. She is also a past board member of the Illinois Caucus for Adolescent Health and the Midwest Access Project. For more than 25 years, she has worked and organized on behalf of sexual minority women, anti-violence, gender equity, health prevention, reproductive justice, as well as race and culture issues. Gaylon has consistently applied her knowledge and practice towards quality improvement, increased access, and by challenging frameworks that do not allow for the exploration of diversity across multiple dimensions when working with and on behalf of diverse constituencies. In 1995, as a trained organizer through Metropolitan Tenants Organization, she facilitated the affordable housing preservation at Ogden Corners, located in Lincoln Park. Working with the property management company and residents council, she assisted in securing a $1 million rehab loan from the Department of Housing and Urban Development to preserve affordable housing on the north side of Chicago. Born and raised in Chicago, Illinois, she was awarded both her Bachelor and Master of Arts degrees from DePaul University and her doctoral degree in community psychology from National Louis University. She has received awards both locally and nationally from Sister Song Women of Color Reproductive Justice Collective, Northwest Suburban Now, Choice USA, Chicago Foundation for Women, and Chicago Now for her work in the reproductive rights, health, and justice field. Gaylon was also highlighted in the Chicago Woman magazine as one of the Fierce 50 and in the Chicago Reader as the activist in the People edition. She was also inducted into Chicago's Gay and Lesbian Hall of Fame for her work on reproductive justice issues. As the current executive director of Grandmothers for Reproductive Rights, or GER, she works across the country to lift the voices of grandmothers, grandothers, and elders in the reproductive justice movement. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Gaylon Alcaraz.
In a minute, I need. Put this on. Like this. Okay, perfect. Good afternoon, everyone. Let me just open up my laptop here. Oopsie. Okay, so this doesn't look like this is going to stay up here. I hope so. Hey, Champaign, Urbana. I'm coming from the south side of Chicago. Yep, south side. I am like so glad to be here today with you. You just don't know, because I was sick as a dog last week. So I was working. I was trying to work this out. I was like, I gotta get there. I gotta get there. So before I begin, I want to do some acknowledgments to the mothers of the RJ movement. Tony Bond Leonard, Reverend Alma Crawford, Evelyn Field, Terry James, Bisola Martigay, Cassandra McConnell, Cynthia Newbill, Loretta Ross, Elizabeth Terry, and Mabel Thomas are the women that were caucusing back in 1994 at a white pro-choice movement and came up with the RJ framework that our movements today are utilizing. You know, they laid that foundation that grounds us today. And so we just want to make sure that we always say thank you and that we're grateful they gave up a lot to do that. I also got to really acknowledge the members of the Jane Collective that's out of Chicago. Jane ensured that women were able to access abortion services in the 60s and the 70s when it was illegal. I'm sure that they would not, you know, they don't believe what's happening today. Of all their work, seems like it was, you know, for nothing. So always make sure that we are acknowledging them as well. They were your age doing abortions, right? So thank you to Dr. Tiller and Dr. Carhart for trusting women. Rest in power, Judy Carl, our founder, and Cecile Richards. So just make sure that we keep these stories as our stories get ready to get erased, that we keep the stories of the people that are responsible for this movement. So I am a product of an all-girls Catholic high school. um, wow. I went to an all-girls boarding school, so I got shipped away, and then ended up at another another Catholic school. Graduated from Saint Sabina. If you are familiar with Father Mike, the activist priest on the south side of Chicago, off of 79th Street, I graduated from that school, and then I headed over to Queen of Peace High School in Burbank, Illinois. It's no longer there. At the time in the 80s when I arrived there, it was probably about 30 Black girls out of a class of 400. So we were shipped via charter buses down 79th Street into Burbank, Illinois. If you're not familiar, Burbank is on the southwest side, very racist area in the 80s. And so I did not get anything about sex education in high school. And in fact, I remember a girl a year older than us becoming pregnant. And as she began to show, then one day she did not come back to school. So, you know, I didn't learn anything about health, about my body. I didn't get any sex education at home. My best friend, though, who they also went to all girls schools, they went to Maria. She has 6 sisters. So I really hung out with them a lot. I observed, I was the oldest in my household. So I observed from my best friend and her sisters. But I was still like really ignorant to a lot of stuff that was going on about sex, about my body, about health, about autonomy. So it was not a surprise that after graduating out of high school, I had my first abortion. I was 17 years old. I know a lot of you do not know what this is, but I was using a sponge and I didn't know how to use it. So I ended up getting pregnant. I was working at McDonald's. My boyfriend was the manager And I remember breaking down a fry machine, and the smell made me sick to my stomach. My mom and the guy, they took me to my appointment and they paid for my procedure. And then later, I had 2 additional abortions in my life. And I still did not know about my body. I still did not know about birth control. But I had the ability to choose and plan exactly when I wanted to become a parent. I am a mother. I am because I was not forced to bear children that I did not want. These are some of the thoughts that I would have when I was doing my abortion doula work. And I held women's hands as they went through their procedures. And the first few times that I was actually in the room with the women, I was watching and waiting for the propaganda images to appear. You know, the signs that they hold outside of the abortion clinics. I was waiting to see that, and I didn't see that. What I did see was young women that were making the best decisions for themselves, you know, as they plan their families. I saw immigrant women wanting a new life. I saw women talking about their future businesses. They want to have nail salons and hair salons. I saw wives just not willing to have more children. And many of those women were trying to justify their decision to me as I held their hand, as if they were seeking approval. And I, you know, will always stop them. That's not my job. That's not my job. Um, I let them know that it was not important. You didn't need a reason to choose you in this moment or in any moment. You don't need a reason. I would say, and I would hold their hands and I would wipe their foreheads and I would help them focus on their breathing. And then I thought of myself as a 17-year-old having an abortion. And I was glad that I was not alone during that process. When young women sought out their funding for their second trimester abortions when I was at CAF, the words bodily autonomy and freedom were always this piece of the puzzle. You know, supporting those women in housing and employment were critically important. And that's what really became my mission. It had to be, in order for people to make good decisions, they had to have resources, they had to have, you know, opportunity. And, you know, as the RJ movement states, you know, access to abortion was just one issue. Those women that were coming to me, they didn't have food. They couldn't afford food. Did she have adequate shelter? You know, one young woman, when she came to me, her and her sister were living in a 2-bedroom apartment with about 4 kids between them. You know, did she have decent clothes and shoes to wear? So I was going to help her pay for her procedure, but I also needed to know that she was okay outside of that experience. What else did she need? Working at an abortion fund showed me so much about myself. A lot of people may feel conflicted. And, you know, I just was not ever one of those people. I knew how women ended up here, and I was doing this work, you know, out of love. Even through threatening phone calls and nasty mail and maintaining a post office box not connected to my home address and my car not registered to my home. But I still wasn't fearful of doing this work, and it helped me grow a lot. My second abortion was born out of a relationship with a man that was almost 15 years older than me when I was 18, 17, 18. Yeah, I was turning 18. And he used to push me around, and he would not wear a condom. And I thought I loved him. And much of the time, that time then was a blur, actually. I didn't know what love was. I did know that I did not want to be with him. And I wish someone would have taken me under their wing and provided me with some guidance and support and wrapped me up in an RJ blanket and loved on me. What else did I need? No one else asked me what else did I need. What did I want to do with my life? I had no restrictions. I could live freely. I could have an abortion if I wanted to. So when I began my college experience, I knew that I would focus on reproductive justice. I wanted to understand the theory. I had to. I needed to dive into it. I needed, leading an abortion fund and becoming an abortion doula gave me practice. Now I wanted to explore different viewpoints. I wanted the intellectual conversation of choice, access, and RJ. And would this help me reconcile my own experiences? What more could I understand about reproductive justice? What now? My third and final abortion happened. Honestly, I don't remember it. It didn't scar me. It was just an experience. Abortion is healthcare. It served my purpose. My only sadness came because of the ending of a relationship. I should not have endured that toxic relationship. Still, I wasn't ready to be a mother. And so I wasn't. And then I was. I became pregnant with my son. His ball of happiness broke my world in two. I was no longer about me, it was about we. I wanted motherhood with him. I wanted to experience this type of love. He would look at me and I would become so full. He was 5 when my little girl came along. And what existed before them two, I don't know. I don't know what even mattered before those two. I went on to write, to live, to dance, to experience happiness and heartache and sadness and raise beautiful children. Life fully existed every time I made a choice. And that is joy. I have empathy for those needing to make these abortion decisions now, especially when they are standing in a gap alone without support. But if there's anything that I have learned as a mother, as an abortion doula, as an organizer, as an executive director, is that we gonna find a way. We gonna find a way no matter what. They cannot put the cap back on the bottle. That's over and done with. They cannot erase my story and my life. I lived it, and they can't take that away. And I'm not gonna be ashamed to talk about my life, to talk about my 3 abortions, to talk about becoming a mother and not having the resources to take care of my children. I'm not going to be ashamed to talk about that. So what now? What do I do now with all that I know and all that I experienced? What now? And some words that come to mind: contentment and joy and rejoice and love and compassion and support and grace and resistance, patience and understanding. We cannot let our foot up off that gas. I'm not going to sit up here and talk about the despair that we are up under right now, because we can find joy in our everyday things that we're doing, in our communities that we are serving. Our communities need us. We need each other. We need to come into these spaces and be with each other. We need to be genuine and build community with one another in a real, genuine way. That's reproductive justice. It's not about getting something from you or getting something from you. It's getting to know each one of us in a very real and genuine and authentic way, and then supporting each other, right? We got to find our passion. If you don't know what your passion is, you got to find it, right? Do not get caught up in this clown circus. It's easy to get caught up in it, and don't, you know. Somebody asked me earlier, I had the ability to talk to students last night, find your passion. It's out there, and don't let your foot up off that gas. It's critical now more than ever before. I sometimes think, if I had not had the ability to have choice or control, I would be the mother of 5 children, and I wouldn't even be standing here. I had the ability to choose that when I wanted to parent, and I chose to have my children. And for that, that made me a great mom. So thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I love being here. Always gonna rep the South Side of Chicago. So, let me know if you have any questions, and, feel free to reach out and talk to me, okay?
We're taking a few questions.
I'll take questions. Yeah, you want me to lead us on? I'll lead us on.
Okay, we have time for some questions, so if there are things folks would like to ask.
So you said you were 17 when you got your first abortion. What was it like to, although not know your body, have parents who were willing and able to allow you to have the procedure and support you through that? Do you think that made a big change in who you are today and the choices that you made?
Quite honestly, I really wanted to sound profound, but it's not. It's not profound. My mom, was going through post-traumatic stress disorder all throughout high school. I remember my mom sometimes not coming out of her bedroom because my father was killed right before I graduated from grammar school. So she just did it. I don't have any thoughts about it. Um, I wanted to have an abortion. I didn't want to have a child. And so she took me, and the guy paid for it. I mean, it was access, but I just don't think it was that deep. you know, she just did it, and I just moved on. So
If you feel comfortable sharing, I'm curious how your experiences with abortion shaped your experience of giving birth and pregnancy, and do you think that it had an effect on how you viewed your pregnancy and viewed your birth, or do you think that they were kind of two like separate things?
honestly, I, you know, I don't want it to, I don't want to sound so cavalier. Honestly, that's not what I'm trying to to sound like. But, you know, I came into this activist movement as a fully grown woman. And so I already had a lens that I was utilizing. And so I don't, really connect them to like that. It's just like I got pregnant, I wasn't ready to have a baby. And so I just had an abortion. And it happened 2 more times. And then when I was ready to have a baby, I had my 2 children. And sometimes it's just as easy as that. Sometimes people want it to be all this, and it's just not. Sometimes it's not that. It is just. This abortion is health care, and I needed an abortion at that time. And then when I was ready to have my baby, I had my 2 babies. And, I really focused in on my children when I did have them. I was totally hands-on, PTA, Ellis, local school council. My son was in hockey, my daughter was in figure skating. Like I was totally into being a parent. I had the choice, had I been forced to be a parent before I wanted to be, I wouldn't have been that type of parent. So I don't think it just was never even that deep to me. I never had any experiences and, honestly, just, never, oh, I wish I would have had my kids. I wish I never would have had an abortion. I never even thought that because it just felt like this was my life and I'm gonna live my life. So yeah. Some questions back there.
Several questions. I'll just have to find you later. Because I know talking about having these abortions in a very casual way, it's very interesting to me as a therapist of like, what does make getting them traumatic versus these are just an experience that I did have, and we have that conversation. But my most interesting thing for me is, you didn't have the education around your body and yourself before having your first abortion. And then I'm just curious of what age did you decide to go into reproductive justice and health? And what about your experiences inspired you to do that and kind of what the drive was at the path that you took? Because I'm very interested in like, how did you go from here to being our keynote speaker today?
Some of that was, I remember having a little bit of a conversation last night about this, and this is not, we are ordinary people doing some extraordinary things, right? And it was just not ever that profound. I needed a job. And my mentor was on the selection committee at CAF. And she said, are you interested in doing this executive director work? And I said, I had never, ever been an executive director before. And I didn't know what that was. And she said, hey, you sat on boards, you know how to read budgets, you know how to do programming, you can do it. And I applied and got it. And it was just like that. It was like this job, and so I was more intentional about this current position I'm in now, right? I focused on like, I wanted to finish up my PhD and I wanted to go back into RJ after being out of the movement for some years because I wanted to apply theory and practice. And so I was really intentional about GER's work, right? But then it was like, I had little kids. I needed a job. That's just real. It's just I need to work.
I want to respond to exactly what you just said with another question, which is, you said, I just needed a job. Also on the flip side of things, I think, myself included, a lot of people sometimes you just need a job and you gotta get a job, but then you wish that you had more time to invest in the things that you care about and balancing the reality of having to work with. Sometimes wishing that, your, activism, social justice endeavors could be your work. And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about, expanding those kinds of opportunities, like, how can folks work to create more paid opportunities to do social justice work and specifically reproductive justice work so that, you know, they are freed up to actually dedicate all of their time if that is something that people want to do, as opposed to being like, I have my 9 to 5 because I have to work and then spending all that extra time, even though we feel very passionately about it.
Right, right. And that makes sense. And that's a really good question. I am a real strong believer in stepping out the way and letting people lead and letting young people lead, and not hogging this perceived power, not hogging that. We see that. We see that across a lot of different movements. We see that in politics, where you got people that just stay in office forever till a day, till somebody's wheeling them out, And so I've never been the type of person that believed in that. I think, you can create opportunity for yourself if you want to. I think it is, deciding on what you want to do, doing internships, connecting and aligning yourself with organizations that you feel passionate about, learning as much as you can. You can start up your own non-for-profit. You can start up your own work. You can start up you can do all that yourself, And so I think, like I was telling the students last night, there is not a straight path to what you want to do. I was on a crooked path, and found my way, some kind of way, right? And I just think you just have to think about that. Now, remember, I had a whole activism life before I even got to RJ. So I was doing affordable housing, mobilizing in HUD buildings and showing, young people how to, organize and around LGBTQ issues. And so I was doing that other stuff before I even got to RJ. I've just always followed what I love. And I think that's what has led me and have kept me, in that manner. So, but it can't just be about being a 9 to 5, right? I started CAF because I needed a job. But when it came down to it, me organizing the women that was calling CAF and training them on how to be activists and having them go out into their communities and teach their communities on RJ, that was the work that I loved, not the writing the grants. And that I didn't like doing that. And as a trained organizer, I was used to being out in the street with my signs and stuff, and then I had to sit behind a desk, and I hated that. So I was doing all this activism before I even got to CAF, before I even came to RJ, and it helped me learn and it helped me grow. And then it led me to my next step of going through into my PhD program to really understand it from some different lens. And so, yeah.
We have a question from someone who's watching on live stream.
So our question from Amanda today is, I was wondering if Dr. Alcaraz could talk more about the propaganda that she's seen from the pro-life side. I went to Catholic school and saw a lot of propaganda, and I'm not even sure what's true and what is not.
So just to talk a little bit about what I'm saying and what I'm meaning around the propaganda from the anti-choice movement. So we used to go out and counter protest outside abortion clinics. And so, They be on their side, we be on our side. And they would hold up signs of supposedly, dead babies, all bloody, all that kind of stuff. And I remember, like, I had did research, and those were not from abortions. They were propaganda. They were not real. Um, and so everything is, is about shock and awe, right? That's the whole thing. And I remember we had went out there one time, and I walked up to one of the older men that was holding one of those signs, and I asked him why he was holding that sign up. And he said, well, don't you believe in the sanctity of life? And I said, that sign is not real. Why are you holding that up? And, he couldn't answer. He was kind of shocked that somebody was actually talking to him, you know, as opposed to screaming and stuff. And so I just confronted him and I said, you know what, if you have a strong argument and you really believe in what you saying, you don't even have to hold that sign up. Now, that's out of pocket. You don't even have to do that. And he went and put the sign in his trunk. He came back out, he stood out there, but you know, those things are not there to make you just grasp, and somebody coming in to their procedure and they see that they're already in a heightened emotional state, and then you see that's exactly what they want you to do, and so, I look up and I research. We are in places of higher learning. So, right, we have all this research and all this information at our fingertips, and we need to make sure that we are aware of the things that we are observing. We don't necessarily have to get into these shouting matches with these people, but like I said, when I was in, I saw abortions with my own eyes. I was in the room, and it did not look like that sign. It didn't look like that. And so, I had the ability to experience it firsthand and do research and know that that was not accurate and that wasn't real. And so, yeah, I moved from that lens. Hi.
First of all, I just want to thank you for your authenticity and transparency today. I think your words have really brought a lot to us all, so thank you for that. But my question is that I'm wondering what you found to be most supportive, helpful during your abortion experiences, whether that was, a resource that was recommended to you, someone being there. So yeah.
Yeah. So what was most helpful, honestly, was my mom being there and the guy paying for it. So my mom didn't have to pay for it. That was most helpful. And so my other two abortions after that, I don't really have a lot of memory of that. Um, so I wasn't traumatized. I just, think back. I'm almost 60. If you can believe it. And so I had to sit back and think, what was happening then? But I was not traumatized. I was on to the next thing, living life. And so, I don't know how supportive the guy was at the time. I just don't remember. But my very first abortion, my mom was there and that guy was there. He paid for it. And so that was the most, because my mom, we were dealing with poverty when I was going through high school. Remember, my father was killed right before I graduated from grammar school. My mom insisted on sending me to this Catholic school because my father wanted me to go there. So she really scraped the bottom of the barrel to send me there. And so, she didn't have no money for abortions. And so that was helpful of you had this guy, we could say stand-up guy, I guess, that paid for this, and knew, he had a responsibility in this process, but he didn't try to stop me from having it. So, yeah.
I think we have time for about one more, maybe two questions.
So you talked about the origins of the reproductive justice movement coming out of pro-choice conversations. Personally, it wasn't until anti-racism workshop where I even learned about reproductive justice as a framework. And that's now almost 3 years ago. Where do you feel like the movement is in terms of getting people to evolve beyond just it's about abortion rights and into reproductive justice? Where do you feel like the movement is today?
That is a great question. And I think that for places of higher learning and activists, we know and we are ahead of the curve, right? We're doing the work, we on the ground, we're using the language, we are connecting the communities and connecting people to the resources. So we know. I think there are a lot of people still in the pro-choice movement that don't understand RJ and still work from this singular frame. And that does a disservice to communities, right? Because it's not just about abortion. And the more that people center it on that, you do a disservice to people because like what I said, I was helping young women access second trimester abortions, right? But they needed help with their rent, they needed food, and so if you are just thinking about abortions, you're missing out on supporting young people, women, individuals in some real ways that can really change their lives. Yes, you can, if you have an abortion, that's fine, but if you can't afford to pay your rent, you might find yourself doing stuff that puts you in danger to pay your rent, and you might be pregnant again. So we got to look outside of just that. And it's still a large population of people that don't really understand RJ.
All right, one last question. I think I saw Roddy. Okay.
Hello. Hi.
So thank you so much for sharing everything today. I'm curious, as a doctoral student in psychology, what is that like for you, going into it, wanting to learn the theory behind it all? How do you feel like your activism informed your program, and after leaving, what are you taking away from it?
Yeah, so I've had such a rich life. I'm a part of Black Girls Run, and I came up with this idea of like, I really want to know what the Black men groups think about abortion and abortion restriction. It was just people, the guys that I was running with on a daily basis and doing marathons and stuff with, and I was like, I want to know what they thinking. They always knew what I was doing, and I'm sure I was like, the weirdo. But I really, and especially guys that had girl children, I wanted to understand, you know, what was their thought process about reproductive rights restrictions. So that's where I kind of centered, my thesis. I surveyed Black men and women, but only of my running group. And for my dissertation, I only talked to Black men runners because I really wanted to understand, like, how these dudes feminists, they just fronting, how they fronting on us, And, and, because I mean, men walk around, black men walk around like a manly man type stuff, right? And I wanted to know, like, I was just curious. And they did prove me right. They are feminists. They would hate that, but they are feminists. And it just really opened my eyes to more of you can't make an assumption about people. Sometimes people change and it's okay as people get older. They change their thought, their process, how they think about things, and it's totally fine. So that was just, I was just being nosy and I just want to know what's in their head. These guys that I was running marathons with, I was like, yeah, I want to see what's going on with them. So that's really how it all came about. It was deep and profound when I started asking them questions and doing the interviews. But I think overall, people understand that, a woman has a right, an individual has the right. And I tied that in because if, when you're in these running groups and these physical, working out together groups, right? People are really focused on their bodily autonomy. Oh, we got to make sure we eat right. Did y'all do y'all 3-minute plank? We got to do our train and run. It was all about bodily autonomy in that space. And that's why I really wanted to understand, like, okay, y'all are really on me about my marathon training, but let me see how much you believe in true bodily autonomy. And so that's how that whole conversation and work and scholarship came about because I wanted to, be nosy and figure them out.
Thank you. Thank you all so much. Let's give Gaylon another round of applause. Okay, thank you all so much. I have so many questions, but we'll have more time. Yeah, this is great. So we're gonna transition now, but before you stand up, let me just let you know what happens. So we've got about 15 minutes, lots of time. Use the restroom, please. More food, more drink, whatever works, whatever you need. And then you're